A billionaire's son vanishes without a trace. The police hit a dead end, but when a lonely janitor with a dark past stumbles upon the truth, he faces an impossible choice: walk away or risk everything to save a life. What happens next will leave you breathless. Before we dive into this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring tale of courage against all odds. The disappearance. The Chicago skyline glittered under the fading afternoon sun, its towering buildings casting long shadows over the streets below. Inside the sleek, glass-walled offices of Knight Industries, the hum of productivity was winding down. Employees packed their bags, eager to escape another grueling day under the iron-fisted leadership of CEO Richard Knight. Richard stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner office, his sharp blue eyes scanning the city. At 48, he was a man who commanded fear and respect in equal measure, ruthless in business, cold in negotiations, but fiercely devoted to one thing: his 10-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan was supposed to be waiting for him in the lobby. Richard had promised to take him to the Cubs game tonight, a rare break from his relentless work schedule. But when he stepped off the elevator, his assistant Claire was pacing nervously, her phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. "Richard," she said, her voice tight. Ethan never showed up. The school said he left at the usual time with the driver, but he's not here. A cold knot twisted in Richard's stomach. He pulled out his phone, dialing Ethan's number for the 5th time in 10 minutes. Straight to voicemail. "Call security," Richard ordered, his voice low and controlled, though his hands trembled slightly. "Pull up every camera in this building and on the street. Now!" Detective Marrez arrived within 20 minutes, her sharp gaze taking in the scene. She was a no-nonsense investigator with a reputation for cutting through corporate BS, something Richard Knight had in spades. "We've got footage," Mara said, standing in the security office as the head of security replayed the video. The screen showed Ethan stepping out of the school pickup line, his backpack slung over one shoulder. A black van pulled up, not the usual Knight Industries car. A masked figure emerged, saying something that made Ethan hesitate before nodding and climbing inside. Richard's breath caught. He went with them willingly? Mara frowned. Either he knew them, or they convinced him they were supposed to pick him up. The police launched an immediate citywide search, but as hours turned into a full day, there was no ransom call, no demand, just silence. Meanwhile, in the basement maintenance room of Knight Tower, Hector Morales wiped sweat from his brow as he finished mopping the executive floor. At 52, he was a quiet man, his dark eyes holding a lifetime of unspoken stories. Once, he had been a firefighter, a hero. Now, he was invisible, just another janitor in a blue uniform. As he emptied the trash in the security break room, he overheard 2 guards laughing over coffee. "Kid's probably halfway to Mexico by now," one muttered. Hector froze. The other guard, a bulky man named Vince, smirked. "Boss is going to lose his mind when he finds out it was an inside job." Hector kept his head down, pretending not to listen, but his pulse spiked. He knew that voice, because one of the men wasn't just a security guard. It was his brother, Luis. Hector's hands shook as he pushed his cart down the hall. Luis had been in and out of prison for years. Drugs, theft, even assault. They hadn't spoken in a decade. But this, kidnapping a child? His mind raced. If he went to the police, Luis would deny everything. If he stayed silent, a boy could die. Then he heard it, a hushed conversation near the service elevator. "Warehouse by the docks. Crow's orders. Don't screw this up." Hector's blood ran cold. Daniel Crow, Richard Knight's former business partner, the man who'd been publicly ruined in a corporate scandal last year. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was revenge. And Hector was the only one who knew. The janitor's secret. The fluorescent lights in the maintenance room buzzed like an angry swarm of bees as Hector Morales slumped onto a folding chair, his calloused hands gripping his knees. The weight of what he just overheard pressed down on him like a physical force. His brother, Luis, the same reckless kid who'd stolen their mother's jewelry to pay off gambling debts, the same man who'd sworn he'd changed after his last prison stint. was involved in a kidnapping. And not just any kidnapping. The son of Richard Knight. Hector exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. He could still hear the way Luis had laughed in that security break room, the casual cruelty in his voice when he said, "Boss is going to lose his mind." He should go to the police. That's what a good man would do. But Hector hadn't felt like a good man in a long time. Flashback, 5 years earlier. The fire had swallowed the apartment building whole, its hungry flames licking at the night sky. Hector, then a veteran firefighter, had been the first inside, his oxygen mask secured as he pushed through the smoke. A woman had screamed from the third floor. Her son was still trapped in the back bedroom. He'd found the boy curled under a bed, small and terrified. "Come on, kid, I've got you," Hector had said, reaching for him. Then the ceiling collapsed. Hector blinked, dragging himself back to the present. His leg ached where the beam had pinned him that night. A constant reminder of his failure. The boy had died. The mother's screams still haunted his dreams. And now another child was in danger. His fingers trembled as he pulled out his phone, hovering over the call button for the police. But then he stopped. Luis wasn't stupid. If he saw cops swarming the docks, he'd panic. And if he panicked, Ethan Knight might not make it out alive. Hector made his decision. He shoved his phone back into his pocket and grabbed his keys. If he was going to do this, he needed to move fast. Before Luis realized anyone was on to them. The parking garage was nearly empty at this hour, the concrete walls echoing with the sound of his hurried footsteps. His old pickup truck sat in the far corner, its paint chipped and faded. He yanked the door open and froze. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat. "Luis," his brother smirked, tapping a cigarette against the dashboard. "Took you long enough. Hermano. Figured you'd come running the second you heard my voice." Hector's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Get out." Luis chuckled, lighting the cigarette. "Or what? You gonna call the cops?" His smile faded. "You always were a snitch." "This isn't some petty theft, Luis. You kidnapped a kid." "I didn't take him," Luis said, exhaling smoke. "I'm just a hired help. But hey, since you're so concerned, why don't you come see for yourself?" Hector's stomach twisted. This was a trap. He knew it, but Ethan was still out there. "Where is he?" Luis's grin returned, slow and knowing. "Docks, Warehouse 17. But Hector?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You walk in there, you don't walk out. Crow's got plans for that kid, and you're not part of them." 20 minutes later, Hector stood in the shadows outside Warehouse 17, his pulse hammering in his throat. The place was a graveyard of rusted shipping containers and broken machinery, the air thick with the stench of oil and salt water. A single light glowed from a second-floor window. Hector moved silently, his old firefighter training kicking in. He found a side door with a broken lock and slipped inside, the darkness swallowing him whole. The warehouse was a maze of crates and pallets, the only sound the distant drip of water. Then, a whimper. Hector's breath caught. He followed the sound, creeping past stacks of cardboard boxes until he saw it, a makeshift cell barred with a chain-link fence. And inside, curled into a ball on a dirty mattress, was Ethan Knight. The boy looked up, his eyes wide with fear. Hector stepped forward, a hand clamped over his mouth from behind, yanking him into the shadows. "You shouldn't be here," a voice hissed in his ear. Hector knew that voice. Detective Mara Reyes. No way out. Hector's muscles tensed as Detective Mara Reyes' grip tightened around his mouth. Her other hand pressed something cold and hard against his ribs. The barrel of her gun. His mind raced. Was she working with Crow? Had she been part of this from the beginning? She dragged him behind a stack of wooden crates before finally releasing him, her dark eyes flashing a warning in the dim light. "Make a sound and we're both dead," she whispered. Hector rubbed his jaw, keeping his voice low. "You're not with them?" Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. "I've been tracking Crow for weeks. He's been planning this since Knight destroyed his company." She glanced toward the fence cell where Ethan sat. "But we've got a problem. There are 4 armed men patrolling this warehouse, and Crow isn't one of them. He's smarter than that. He's watching from somewhere else." A floorboard creaked above them. Both froze as heavy footsteps passed overhead. Hector's gaze darted back to Ethan. The boy was now standing, his small hands gripping the chain-link fence as he peered into the darkness, looking for help, looking for a way out, just like the boy in the fire. Hector's chest tightened. We need to get him out. Now! Mara shook her head. We call for backup. No time. Hector pointed to a guard rounding the corner, his rifle slung over his shoulder. They could move him any minute. Mara studied Hector's face, then sighed. Fine, but we do this smart. You create a distraction. I'll get the kid. Hector hesitated. Last time he'd been responsible for a child's life, it had ended in tragedy. But Mara was already moving, her silhouette blending into the shadows. Now or never. Hector waited until a patrolling guard passed again before stepping into the open. He grabbed an empty metal barrel and sent it crashing to the ground. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Who's there? The guard spun, raising his weapon. Hector didn't answer. He ran. Footsteps pounded behind him as he ducked between towering shelves, his heart hammering against his ribs. A bullet whizzed past his ear, embedding itself in a wooden crate. He dove behind cover, just as two more guards appeared from the opposite direction. Trapped! From across the warehouse, he heard Ethan's frightened cry. Mara had reached him, but one of Crow's men had spotted them. The guard raised his gun. Hector didn't think. He lunged. The tackle sent them both sprawling, the gun skittering across the concrete. Hector's fist connected with the man's jaw once, twice, until he went limp. A shout came from the catwalk above. Another guard. Hector scrambled for the fallen weapon just as a shot rang out. White-hot pain seared through his shoulder. He stumbled, clutching the wound as blood seeped between his fingers. Mara appeared at his side, half dragging Ethan behind her. Move! They sprinted for the exit, bullets biting into the walls around them. The door was just ahead. It burst open before they reached it. Louis stood in the doorway, a pistol leveled at Hector's chest. For a heartbeat, the brothers locked eyes. Then Louis smiled. Told you shouldn't have come. The firefighter rises. The world seemed to slow as Hector stared down the barrel of his brother's gun. Blood dripped from his wounded shoulder, each drop hitting the concrete floor with a soft tap that echoed in the sudden silence. Behind him, Ethan whimpered, his small fingers clutching at Hector's janitor uniform. Detective Mara shifted slightly, her own weapon still drawn but useless. One wrong move, and Luis would pull the trigger. Luis's smirk widened. You look like hell, hermano. Hector didn't flinch. Let the kid go. And lose the biggest payday of my life. Louis snorted. Crow promised me $500,000 for this job. You really think I'm walking away because you played hero? From the corner of his eye, Hector saw Mara's grip tighten on her gun. If she fired, Louis would too. And with Ethan standing right behind him, Hector exhaled slowly. Then, without warning, he lunged. The gunshot was deafening. Pain exploded in Hector's side, but he didn't stop. He slammed into Louis, driving them both through the doorway and into the rain-soaked night outside. They hit the ground hard, rolling across the gravel parking lot. Louis's gun skidded out of reach. You never could just walk away. Louis snarled, driving a fist into Hector's wounded shoulder. Hector gritted his teeth against the white-hot agony and struck back, his knuckles connecting with Louis's jaw. His brother staggered but didn't go down. Somewhere behind them, shouts erupted. Crow's men were coming. Mara appeared in the doorway, her gun raised. Hector, move! He barely had time to duck before she fired. One of Crow's men crumpled to the ground. The other scattered for cover. Louis used a distraction to scramble for his gun. Hector was faster. He tackled Louis again, pinning him to the ground. It's over, he growled. Louis laughed, blood staining his teeth. You don't get it, do you? Crow's not here. He's already gone. And that kid... His grin turned vicious. He was never meant to be ransomed. Hector's blood ran cold. A roar of engines filled the air. Headlights flared as two black SUVs screeched into the lot, doors flying open. More of Crow's men. Mara grabbed Hector's arm. We have to go, now. Hector hesitated, his gaze darting between Luis and Ethan, who stood frozen in the warehouse doorway, his face pale with terror. The choice was easy. He yanked Luis up by his collar and shoved him toward Mara. "Take him. I'll get Ethan." Mara opened her mouth to argue, but Hector was already running back toward the warehouse. Bullets peppered the ground at his feet as Crow's men opened fire. He didn't stop. Ethan was still standing there, shaking. Hector scooped him up without breaking stride. "Hold on tight, kid." They burst through a side door just as the SUV skidded to a halt outside. The warehouse was a maze of shadows and storage racks, but Hector knew places like this, knew where to hide. He ducked behind a stack of pallets, Ethan clinging to him like a lifeline. The boy's breath came in ragged gasps. "Are they going to kill us?" Hector adjusted his grip, ignoring the fiery pain in his shoulder. "Not today." Footsteps pounded nearby. Voices shouted orders. Hector's eyes landed on a red emergency exit sign across the room. If they could make it there. A shadow moved in front of them. Daniel Crow stepped into view, his tailored suit untouched by the chaos around them. In his hand, a sleek silver pistol gleamed under the flickering lights. "Hector Morales," Crow said, his voice smooth. "I've heard so much about you." Hector pushed Ethan behind him. Crow sighed. "You really should have stayed out of this." He raised a gun. A deafening blast filled the air, but it didn't come from Crow's weapon. The warehouse doors exploded inward as a SWAT team stormed in, rifles raised. Crow spun, firing wildly, but was too late. Hector didn't wait to see what happened next. He grabbed Ethan and ran. A new dawn. Rain lashed against the hospital windows, the rhythmic tapping mirroring Hector's heartbeat as he lay in the sterile white bed. Bandages wrapped his shoulder and side, the wound still fresh but no longer bleeding. The doctors had called him lucky. The bullet had missed his lung by half an inch. He didn't feel lucky. The door creaked open. Detective Mara Reyes stepped in, her usual sharp demeanor softened by exhaustion. She dropped a file on the bedside table. "Crow's in custody. So is Luis." Hector didn't respond. His throat was too tight. Mara sighed, pulling up a chair. "We found something in Crow's penthouse. Blueprints. Financial records." She met his gaze. He wasn't just after revenge. He was going to kill Ethan and make it look like Richard's negligence caused it, ruin him completely. The thought made Hector sick. A 10-year-old boy used as a pawn in some rich man's war. A soft knock interrupted them. Richard Knight stood in the doorway, his tailored suit wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed. For the first time, he looked like a father, not a CEO. Ethan peeked out from behind him, clutching a folded piece of paper. Richard cleared his throat. "I owe you my son's life." His voice cracked. "No amount of money can repay that." Hector shook his head. "I didn't do it for money." Ethan darted forward before his father could respond, thrusting the paper into Hector's hands. "I drew this for you." Hector unfolded it carefully. A crayon drawing of a firefighter carrying a boy from a burning building. At the bottom, in shaky letters, "To my hero." Something hot pricked at Hector's eyes. 3 months later, the morning sun warmed Hector's back as he knelt in the dirt, helping a group of kids plant saplings in the community garden. His shoulder still ached sometimes, but the doctor said it would heal. A familiar voice piped up behind him. "That one's crooked." Hector turned to see Ethan grinning, his Cubs cap backward like always. Richard stood a few feet away, watching with an unreadable expression. Ethan plopped down next to Hector, grabbing a trowel. "My dad says you used to be a firefighter." Hector's hand stilled. "Yeah, a long time ago." "Are you going to be one again?" The question hung in the air. Hector looked down at the sapling in his hands, fragile, but strong enough to grow. "Maybe," he said at last. Richard stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Knight Industries is funding a new youth center. We could use someone with your experience." He held out a business card. "If you're interested." Hector took it, turning it over in his fingers. Not a janitor's key card, a director's pass. Ethan nudged him. "So, you gonna do it?" Hector smiled. "Yeah, kid, I think I will." This story proves that heroes come from the most unexpected places. If Hector's journey inspired you, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that courage can change everything. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.